Have you ever brought your magic to Walt Disney World like, hey, we came to play? Did you tip your tiara to a Creole princess or get goofy officially? When we come through, it's true magic, because we came to play at Walt Disney World Resort.
Justin and so good. Thousands of spring deals at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save big today on new arrivals from Kate Spade New York, Nike, Sam Edelman, Free People, and Madewell, starting at only $30. Great brands and great prices on dresses, denim, sandals, designer bags, and more. So rack your look and get first dibs on spring styles you want now from just $30 at your Nordstrom Rack store. What will you find?
Today is the day you will lose fat. Come see Dr. T at NJ Diet.
Easiest diet I've ever done. It's changed my life. Come see Dr. T.
Using blood work and DNA testing. 1-855-5NJ-DIET and NJDiet.com. Change your life in only 40 days with NJ Diet. OG.
Make some noise!
New York MC, AWAR, just released his latest album, The Spoils of War, featuring Cormega, Styles P, Scarface, and many others, produced by a freaking all-star cast. It's an amazing album. With that, I want to welcome AWAR to the library with Tim Einenkel. Thanks, man, for joining me.
Thank you, Tim. Much appreciated, man.
Cool. So I want to start with your early work, 2005, Glory Days. Can you just quickly take us into that project? Where were you mentally? Where were you in your life at this time? But also, like, looking back at that album, what was your goal or mission with your art, but also in hip-hop and hip-hop culture?
Okay. Yeah, that was, like I said, my first project, 2005. I was right out of college. I grew up in upstate New York, ended up going to college at Fordham University, which is in the Bronx. And it's a prestigious school, but I wasn't focused on scholastics at that point. I kind of wanted to get away from upstate and kind of experience the melting pot that is New York and go to the shows and the ciphers and all that. And I did that. Met a lot of guys who were underground at the time and who are well-known MCs now. But in the process, I had linked up with a producer engineer by the name of J.J. Brown, who did a lot of work with Louis Logic, did some stuff on Mr. Cheek's album, and he was, kind of popping independently at that time. And, I would take the train from the Bronx to Brooklyn and knock out tracks. That was it wasn't my first time in the studio, but it was my first time being like professionally mixed and whatnot. So that project probably took me, a couple years to put together. I was really just reaching out to different producers that, I thought would fit my sound that weren't well known at the time. One of which was M Phases, who, amazing Australian producer, and he was just, kind of posting his beats on, I think, underground hip hop forums at the time. So I was lucky enough to get like 5 or 6 joints from him before anybody really knew who he was. I also linked up with a guy who I still work with to this day by the name of Vanderslice, who produced the intro to the album and did some interludes and stuff like that. And some other guys who I don't really work with anymore, but who were, a talented cast. And then guest-wise, I had become a part of, I guess, a crew, you would say, in New York called the Fallen Angels. So my man Diabolic was on there. Icon, the Mike King, Manifest, those guys were all like members of that crew. And Poison Pen, who was like an extended family member at that point as well, he was on that album. So that was just, kind of me filling out different records and how to become an MC. I was already, kind of lyrical, but I was still trying to find, my how far I could take it.
I want to go back a little. You talked about leaving upstate New York, the Albany area,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to lump all of everything that every city or town in Albany, but today, right, you have
Sure.
a big push by Buffalo, New York.
Sure.
You got, Benny the
Griselda.
Butcher. Yeah, Griselda's making a big push. Guns and Conway, What was the hip hop scene in Albany at that time before you went to college?
Before I went to college, I think it was close to non-existent, although there was a lot of DJs who had great shows at the time that I was kind of just dubbing tapes of their shows. One of which was DJ Toast, who had a show for, about 20 years and was kind enough to, bring me up as a guest when I was still in high school and had just put together, I guess, an unofficial project with, basically over other people's beats and things like that. But I guess he saw something in me that, he put me on his show. The scene as far as shows, that was before I could even drink, so I don't know if there was much going on. Show-wise, probably one of the elder statesmen of the Albany scene would be a guy by the name of Statik, who was real big in the Christian hip-hop world, but just a real good dude, true hip-hop head, and he was putting together shows. I also linked up with some guys by the name of Desmatic and Sween. They were in a group called Fundamentals, and they were doing a lot of shows. So we kind of built the scene with maybe 10 different artists, where we were just kind of rotating the cast and doing, pretty much every local venue, opening shows for bigger acts that would come through town. And ultimately, it became a bigger movement. We put together something that was called Pitch Control Music, and it was just like kind of a network of artists who are doing shows and putting together projects and, seeing if one guy can help with artwork and one guy can help with videos and all that kind of stuff. So it was a young scene, but it developed into something that's still existent today. It's not, as poppin' as Buffalo as far as having, those artists that you just immediately think of, they're from, Albany or whatever. But, it's definitely an existent scene.
So who were at this time, who were you looking out to? What artists or even producers were your kind of mentors, or even,
I'll say it's a combination of both, because when I started out, and this kind of goes back to your first question, I guess my goal at the time was to be like on Lyricist Lounge and
right.
Eddie Ill and DL tapes and like just, these kind of more obscure independent or underground hip-hop things that, those were my aspirations back then. I was like, yo, these dudes, rap kind of like me, and, they're creative and they use wordplay and they're doing concepts and the beat selection's crazy. But, at the same time, when I was going through high school, heads like Biggie and Nas and Wu-Tang and, all those guys were coming out, and Lord Finesse and DITC and, the list goes on. But so, I guess that would be a more, even though it was, still underground, that would be more of a mainstream kind of influence on me. So I think that, both those worlds kind of merged later on in my career, but I was listening to, both of them.
I want to go to an older track before we get into your new album, and it's Stand Out featuring Joe Budden. The beat is dope, and you kill it.
Thank you.
It's incredible to listen to, and it still holds. I know it's an older track, but today, you still listen. It still holds true today. How, when you get a beat like that, as a lyricist, how do you kind of ensure that you're going to do justice to this beat and not fuck it up? So to say, is there extra pressure you're putting on yourself when you get a kind of a beat like that? Yeah,
I think and if you already know who's going to be on the joint, that might be even more pressure. But, kind of my process at this point is, I'll write the joint and have it ready to go. But I have a great support system and just, a go-to producer and a go-to engineer. And if they feel like something's not up to par, they're not yes men. So they kind of tell me, maybe you should go back to the drawing board. And that doesn't happen very frequently, but it does happen. And that beat, I think, originally was a little bit different than what it was. And, M-Phases had to, I think he lost the files or something like that and had to recreate it. So that joint, ended up being different than when I originally recorded it. But, I would say mostly the support system of just having somebody who will be like, that's not right, do it again. Or, I've been on tracks with some really great MCs. So, if my verse is not up to par, somebody's going to tell me before I put it out, most likely.
Did you know Joe Budden was going to be on this track prior to it, or?
It's been a while since I recorded that joint, but I think usually before I'll ask a guest to get on a joint, I'll at least have the first verse written. Sometimes I'll have it, recorded so I can send it over to an artist.
So they could.
Yeah, so I think in that occasion, it's been a while, like I said, but I think that I had at least the first joint or the first verse and probably the hook written before I sent it over to him.
Your new album, The Spoils of War, great name for an album.
Thank you.
Great cover. What does this title mean for you, and how does it kind of pertain to your art?
Okay. Conceptually, The Spoils of War is kind of like you feel like you've been through it all and you're coming out winning on the other side. So, all these challenges in life and as an artist kind of culminate into the spoils of war. So, conceptually, I've always kind of tried to keep kind of a string of concept going to my album or my project titles. So I put out 3 projects that all had nature in the title. The first one was Things of That Nature EP, and then there was Nature of the Beast, which was kind of like an album, 10 joint album. And then I consider it my retail debut, which was Laws of Nature, which came out in 2012. So titles have always been just kind of a thing where I wanted to make it, philosophical, right, open-ended, kind of leave the listener thinking, well, I'm going to have to actually listen to this thing to understand, what the concept means. Sorry
to cut you off, but titles, during the creation process, do titles come first for you then, or is it depending on?
Somewhere in the process of making the project, I wouldn't say I'd open up with a title, but I probably had 3 or 4 records done before I decided what the title of this was. Yeah, some of the records are older than others, so I definitely had 45 Soul done before I decided what the album title was.
Prior to our interview, I was telling you like the producers on this album, it's like an all-star cast, right? It's like Raekwon, Lord Finesse, Haslo, Statik Selektah, Nottz, The Alchemist, many more. How and this kind of brings, I think, back to what you were talking about earlier with just meeting people. Like, how were you able to connect with all these producers, and also what are you looking for? Probably depends on the project, but what are you looking for in a producer?
Okay. All right. Well, it's various things. So, I'm, like I said before, I'm blessed to work with a producer who's super talented, who is connected to other producers and talks to a lot of them. So, Vanderslice definitely hooked me up initially, I think, with Jake One, which is how we formed that relationship. But he did 3 or 4 records on Laws of Nature, and that's a guy who can pop up on a Drake or Kendrick Lamar record, right, but he also is really good at still keeping his name out there in the independent scene and finding artists who kind of rise up. I think Chance the Rapper was pretty much unknown when he did some joints on Acid Rap, I think was the name of the project. But Jake has just been in the game for 15 years, and I would say somebody like Nottz is very similar in that regard, where he's done Grammy winning projects, but he still is able to find the right independent artist to work with to keep his name out there and keep good music going out there. Nottz is somebody who I've had a relationship with since Laws of Nature as well. I put out that project through his imprint, Raw Concept, and he's been instrumental in helping me link up with some other artists as well. As far as Lord Finesse and Showbiz, that was my first time working with both of them on this project. The story for that is I was at DJ Eclipse's 15th anniversary of the halftime show.
Nice.
So there was just a bunch of MCs and producers there. I think there was probably 4 or 5 different producers playing beats. And, when I was done spitting, I walked out and Lord Finesse and I think Buck Wild were standing there. And so I handed them both a copy of my album because I wasn't expecting them to be, aware of me. And Finesse turned it right around, looked at the track list and saw the producers on there. He's like, damn, I need to get on the next one or whatever.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, about a month or 2 later, my man Parks, who's actually on Joe Button's podcast, he was doing some engineering for me at DITC, DJ Premier Studio for a while. He called me and said, Show and Finesse want to play you some beats. And happened to be my birthday. Went through, listened to some beats for like,
not bad
3 hours. No, it was amazing. So so that's kind of how those joints came about, as well as there's a joint on there called Day One, which is produced by Jay Clyde and DeValbo McKenzie, who are friends and work within a group called Boss Men with Lord Finesse. So Lord Finesse is doing a lot of exciting stuff on the production tip, and you're talking about a guy who's done so many legendary things,
right,
but.
Yeah.
He's still so sharp and on the cutting edge as far as production goes. And then Alchemist, I've had done 5 or 6 records with, and I think he works with people in different ways, but he was cool with Vanderslice, had sent some records through, and I kind of like broke the beats up into different projects over the years. Ultimately, I'd like to get in the lab with him in California and knock out a full project, but shout out to Alchemist. He's given me some
That's dope.
amazing joints.
The track Paper Chasing, I think one of my favorite on the album. If you could just, I'm being nerd here, but if you could just like talk about that track, kind of, and break it down, and also there's so many gems I think on that track. If you could kind of just like take one verse and just explain it.
Okay. All right. Well, the joint is very, soulful, bluesy. It's got a lot of energy in it. And I have a singer on there by the name of Shatish who works with Nottz Camp and sounds like she's like, a 50-year-old singer from the Deep South. She's not. She's much younger than that. But she's got, just that, you don't get that kind of soulfulness on a lot of hip-hop songs these days. But, at the same time, the joint is just really about, and it kind of ties into the Spoils of War record, where it's just like motivational for the hustlers out there. So, all right, so I'm gonna say the first verse is probably, the one I would focus on. Let's see. Sophisticated G's, gifted in arson. Sophisticated G's, we're not the regular type of dudes. We set shit on fire, basically. Gliding in V's with hidden compartments. Gliding in V's, that's vehicles. They got hidden compartments. We're talking about hustler shit, but it's like sneaky hustler shit. Not every hustler would, be able to pull that off. Gliding in V's with hidden compartments. Okay, that goes back to stainless steel. That goes back to the hidden in the trunk, hidden compartment, and then I'm basically saying it's so thick, it's stainless steel that the police dogs can't smell whatever's in there. Okay, you can stop it there. So that the whole first like six bars, I'm just kind of setting the scenery where, it's a hustler. We got a hidden compartment. We're guiding around, and then we transition to the rappers because we're trying to set the difference between this is gentleman G shit, and then you guys are just rappers.
Nice. No, it's great. It's if you listen. I was listening to the album this morning on the train ride, and then this was a song that I listened to, and then I played it again because it was just like it just tells a story really well done, and and then also the singing behind it is, incredible. But it's like one of those things that it's a great beat, it's a simple beat, not simple as in like easy to make, but simple. Mm-hmm. And then your voice kind of really makes that, I'll be cheesy, but a home run, so to say,
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think and with most of these joints, paper chasing is, kind of a straightforward concept, but there's a lot of different things to talk about that. And then I think somewhere in the second verse, towards the end, we're talking about, the impact. I would never glorify, the street life. So, there's, people getting hit by bullets that have nothing to do with this, innocent bystanders. So, it's kind of, I try to make my concepts realistic, and they might not be directly from first person standpoint, but everything kind of comes together to form a story.
Yeah. Raekwon's featured on Well-Known Investors, and you listen to it and there's a lot of back and forth going on between you two. I guess, does that mean you two were in the same studio together? How did that come about?
That was a science project of a song, really. I had that verse from Ray. Ultimately, I was dealing with his brother, and he sent me over the verse, and it was actually over a different beat. And the beat was a Jake One beat, and it was kind of difficult. It was broken up in a weird way. And I was like, man, I don't know if this just isn't sounding right to me. It's one of those, harder projects or harder songs to kind of see where it fits. So like I said, it was a science project. Haslo is a very good friend of mine. He's a really good MC and producer. So I knew with him, he kind of knows how to recreate things. So, I sent him over the verse, and I was like, see if you can come up with something that I can rap to that'll work with this. And once he sent me over the beat, I probably wrote my first verse in like 20 minutes. And then we kind of started picking apart Ray's lines, putting them in certain places, and I wrote around his stuff. So that's probably the only joint I've ever done like that's come out on an official project, where I was like, initially I was like, man, this is Raekwon. The song has to be good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and I didn't want to scrap it because I got a verse from Raekwon. But, instead we kind of took it to formulate this whole story, and everything he was saying was like so obscure and detailed that it made it easier in a way to kind of bounce off of him. And, I like working with artists in that way where, like Haslo, for example, he's an MC too. And, if we get in the studio together, I'll do 2 bars. He does 2 bars. It's really easy, kind of in the same chemistry that Styles and Jada have to kind of work that way. But when you already have a whole verse there, it's a little bit dicier.
Definitely. Throughout this album, you mentioned a few times, you talk about the birth of your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously this album was written or created prior to the birth of your daughter. How has, if at all, has your purpose or your writing changed since she's been born? Is it one of those things that maybe she's too young obviously she's too young right now to understand what you're saying, but are you already seeing that you're maybe changing concepts or storytelling or,
Yeah, I would, there's songs on earlier projects where I probably wouldn't even want her to hear that later on in life. Just more violent stuff, Orange Box Cutter, stuff like that. But it hasn't completely turned me soft either. I think there's a lot of gems that I could provide for her along the way, just as I'm speaking with music. And music's such a personal thing that, I try to put little pieces of my life in there. And, hopefully she likes my music. She seems super, super musical for 9 months old.
She's spitting and stuff? Nice.
Yeah, she's she's already got more rhythm than I do.
Nice.
Her mother's Dominican, so she's she's got that down. Sing a lot of songs to her and stuff like that. So yeah, I come from a musical family, and hopefully she'll appreciate that later on in life. Conceptually, there's stuff that I've said before I knew about the birth of my daughter. I have a song called Reincarnation where I'm talking about, I'm leaving a lot of my bad ways or evil ways in the past and trying to become a better person. And, I think as my music evolves, it becomes more grown. And, hopefully people see the growth and hear the growth in each project.
The track "Me Against the World," couple of things. You reference Tupac. You reference his album "Against All Odds," and then of course, "Me Against the World" is the name of a Tupac track.
Sure.
Is this an ode to Tupac? And if not, how has Tupac kind of influenced you as an artist?
Yeah, that was. The whole track isn't an ode to Tupac, but I definitely needed to, give him some kind of light in that track. So there's definitely a line or two in there dedicated to him. I kind of came up in, the East Coast early 90s thing, so I was definitely riding with Biggie when there was the whole, East Coast, West Coast thing. But I think that somebody like Tupac was underappreciated as far as like conceptually. The Machiavelli album in particular, was probably the first body of work where I was like, this guy, not only was he extremely poetic and ruthless, more so than most other artists, but that album came out after he passed away, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and he was just saying things that were just so poignant, and that really kind of made me a fan. Of course, there was like singles and stuff like that I was hip to prior to that, but like I said, my East Coast bias was probably, earlier in high school. I was like, Tupac is, he's dope, but he's not Biggie.
Nice. Brick Like 86 features Jadakiss and Styles P.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that collaboration process and what was, you work with all these artists, right? So for these two artists, what kind did you take away from, even if you weren't in the studio with them, but what did you take away from their styles or, hearing them on a track with yourself?
Yeah. I was lucky to have a mutual acquaintance to Styles P, who I won't say who he is, but he ran a pretty successful record label for a while, and linked me up with Styles, and we just started texting, and ultimately I had not only that joint, but also a joint that Vanderslice wanted on his record to give to Styles. So I sent through a couple joints, and it was probably a month or two later where he just called me and said, "Yo, come through to the Juice Bar up in Yonkers. This joint's about to be done," or whatever. And so Vanderslice and I went up to his Juice Bar, Juices for Life, up in Yonkers. Just kicked it with him, smoked weed for 8 hours outside the back of that place. And then Poobs came back from Canada, and he said, "We're going over to D Block," and I threw the track on, and it was a masterpiece. So that track in particular, he actually didn't knock out the Vanderslice joint then. So maybe 3 or 4 months later, he's like, "I still got you on the Vanderslice thing," and just like that, he sent through another verse for a joint that I'm on that's not out yet as well. So, Styles is a true gentleman, an OG for sure, and I really respect what he's doing as far as educating the minority crowd on better healthy lifestyle, and I think he also had some really insightful things to say. His daughter had committed suicide it was a couple years ago, and him and his wife kind of both were doing interviews about suicide awareness and things like that. So I definitely took a lot of that game and just soaked up kind of the way he looks at life. And I would say Styles is definitely one of my bigger influences as far as just people in the hip hop world. Oh, another thing I want to say about Styles, the conversation we had with Styles is, it's not just the minority community, because my man Vanderslice at the time was probably, I don't want to say what his weight was, but he was extremely overweight. And the first thing Styles said to him is, you walk out of your house in the morning, walk down to the stop sign, walk back. That could be it for the day. Next day, you go down to the second stop sign, you walk back. He just wants to see people, do well and be healthy. And, I mentioned Vanderslice a couple times, but, after he dropped his album and before I dropped mine, these last projects, his album's called The Greatest Album Money Can Buy. He had a heart attack, and he had hit me up an hour beforehand. He's like, I don't feel right. He's like, I'm either going to try to sleep it off or call an ambulance. I'm like, dude, please call the ambulance. We called the ambulance, and while I guess they had his chest open, he flatlined for, I don't know exactly how long, but he had texted me through this process, and he's like, yeah, I just awoke from a deep sleep. I was dead. They hit me with the paddles, and I'm back awake. So, I think after that, and you can tell somebody who, regardless of what your issue is, whether it be, weight or it be drugs or alcohol or, any kind of addiction, or you can tell them about it, but until they actually have that life-changing experience, a lot of the time, they might just take it with a grain of salt or not be able to, make that immediate change. So, he's definitely making strides for it. And I'll say, Styles P was one of those dudes who's not like afraid to, be like, listen, this is what it is. We need you around. You're an amazing producer.
The last track on the album, I think the last track goes into perfectly what you just talked about. 45 Soul with Anthony Hamilton and Scarface. I mean, obviously two incredible artists. Not to use the word soul again, but it's definitely soulful, it's heartfelt track. Why is it called 45 Soul? But also, why are you leaving the listener with on this album with this track?
45 Soul was actually the name of the beat when I first received it, but it came off of a rare 7-inch single, and just the vibe of it kind of reminds me of, those days when vinyl was super, super important to me. So I just thought it was a great title. And, the way that collaboration came about was Nottz has done some work with Scarface in the past on his albums, and I got a call from Daryl, his longtime manager, partner, and said Scarface is in town. He's going to be here. Try to book a session within the next couple hours. So, I called around. Luckily, I was able to hit up Parks and secured DJ Premier's studio, and Scarface pulled up with DJ Khaled and a Maybach, and Khaled gave me like this, crazy speech in the elevator, and Face came in and made me spit my verse for him, and knocked out his in like half an hour, and it was an incredible experience. Anthony Hamilton was not on that record yet. It was just the two verses, and I sent it back over to Daryl, Nott's manager, and the next day I got another email that had Anthony Hamilton hook on it, and it was like somebody had just like sent me a Grammy via email or something like that, which was nuts. So I had that record before I had any of the rest of the album, and I'm like, I need to build an album around this record. At first I was just gonna do like a soulful EP. I had other records that were soulful on Vanderslice, and I did a joint record called Winning Team that came out 2014. I had other records that I probably could have used for that and just get it out there, and I was holding on to this record for 4 years or so, and I always thought it was going to be like, the center point of the album. And then, as you create music and you hear, the sequencing is so important. Once I came to the sequencing stage, I'm like, yeah, this record doesn't fit anywhere except the end. And I had the intro to the album, which was called the title track, Spoils of War, produced by Raekwon. That was actually going to be the outro. And I made that the intro and kind of, put 45 Soul at the end there. And I'm like, are people going to listen to this all the way to the end and to hear this record? And, a couple people that I had asked were fellow artists. It's like, yeah, they're going to make it to that record, whether they skip through it or not. They're going to hear that record. So
Because I saw the record and you see Scarface and Anthony Hamilton on it, and automatically for me, I think of when they did the joint on Mary Ben-Ari's album, Sunshine to the Rain, which was, and I'm like, oh, and you're like, if they do anything they did, on that, it's going to be an incredible record. And
Sure.
And you have the voice to to stay with them, and you have the lyricism as well to stay with them. So, I mean, it's a great record to end with. It works. I mean, it works perfectly.
Thank you.
So what's next? I mean, what's next for you? I don't want to be that guy that said, "Hey, you just released the album. Where's the new one?"
Right.
But what's next for you?
I shot a bunch of visuals for this record, and I've done that in the past as well. But I kind of held on to a lot of the visuals because this is the first time I dropped an album towards the end of the year. Usually, I'm like somewhere in the spring or summer, and I'll put out a video or two, before the record drops and the day it drops, and maybe a couple afterwards. And this, the climate of the game right now is just so, it's hard to get attention span. Your record's out one day and then it dies the next. And, that's unfortunate. There's so many great records, and 2018 was such a strong year for hip hop that it's easy to, just fall under the radar. So, this time around, I wanted to make sure that I had enough visuals and I can keep on hitting them in the early stage of the year, and remind them that this record is still out there, and I haven't even toured it yet. So, hopefully I can line up some stuff for the springtime as far as shows go. I'm also working on a project with Vanderslice that he's rapping on with me as well, and doing a lot of the beats.
Nice.
I don't know if the title will stick, but he wanted to call it Almost the Chronic.
Nice.
So we have some records for that done. Just starting to put together my next solo record, and might also do a joint album or a joint project with my man Hoslow. And then because of this attention span thing, and because the game is not so much about it still is about the physical thing, but it's also becoming such a streaming based market. I don't want to just disappear for 2 or 3 years between records. So, maybe as I'm recording new material, I'm just going to start dropping singles or EPs and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Just staying out there, not chasing trying to stay relevant, but making music as my life goes on.
New album, The Spoils of War, artist AWAR. Thank you so much for being on the library with Tim Einenkel, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it, man.
Rack your look for spring at Nordstrom Rack and save up to 60% on brands you love. Rag & Bone, Vince, Marc Jacobs, Adidas, Joe's, and more. Great brands, great prices every day at Nordstrom Rack. Score new dresses, denim, sandals, designer bags, and sunglasses, plus updates for the family and home. Get your spring on for less, up to 60% less, today at your Nordstrom Rack store. What will you find?
Meet the next generation of podcast stars with SiriusXM's Listen Next program, presented by State Farm. As part of their mission to help voices be heard, State Farm teamed up with SiriusXM to uplift diverse and emerging creators. Tune in to Stars and Stars with Issa, as host Issa Nakazawa dives into birth charts of her celeb guests. This is just the start of a new wave of podcasting. Visit statefarm.com to find out how we can help prepare for your future. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.